Welcome to Angloromani with Pricey. I'm Pricey, and this is the series where I take a look at the Angloromani paralanguage / dialect, and by looking at the etymology of the words which are found in my family specifically, I'm able to sort of use this as a lens to look at the migration and history of Romany people in Britain today. In this particular episode, I'm going to try to wrap up all of the food terms that I was able to get from a conversation with my dad way back, I think before the winter. However, there is a chance that there are some that I've forgotten, in which case it probably won't be in a food part 3, but rather like it will go into a miscellaneous sort of mix of words video that I might do in the future, unless there's loads. Effectively, my dad's going through a very difficult time right now, so I didn't want to call him up and get sort of refreshed on some of the words which we had discussed back like months ago. And so I'm trying to do this entirely from memory today based on that specific conversation. I probably did write them down, but I can't find it anywhere. The first word I'm looking at today is the word Kassem. Now, this one is not one that I really remember growing up with. Like, my dad and I would quite happily sit there like in the evening and just share like a big chunk of bread and like a block of cheese and a knife and maybe like some sliced up onion, and you know, that would be like a thing that we would just sort of eat in the evening. And mora was a word that was readily used a lot in my family, so you know, it'd be like pasta mora, fine, that's bread. But my dad never really said Kassem around me, but he told me adamantly back in like November, whenever it was, that Kassem was cheese. This is interesting to me because up until now I've mentioned German a few times in these videos, but there's never been a word that's directly come from German until now. As soon as I heard Kassem and kind of picture how it was spelt in my head, I went and looked it up and I was proven correct. This definitely comes from the German word Käse. Having come from a language that's so local to Britain, this is a very cut and dry one, and we can move on. So if, like me, you have an interest in the Romany language and in languages in general, then you may have looked up words which may have come from the Romany language into English. And if you have, then the chances are that you've come across this one, lollipop. So the story with lollipop is kind of disputed because effectively it means candy apple, according to like the Romany etymology, the lollipop being an old Romany word for red, which is not something that I'm familiar with at all, and the pop part of that coming from the Romany word Povva, which I do know, and that's what I'm talking about next. However, this one is disputed. I will say lolly seems to refer to tongue in like an old English slang, and pop refers to, you know, it pops in your mouth. In any case, we're looking at the word Povva, which, if the first etymology is true, no, it's heavily disputed, like I say, is perhaps the word that has stuck around and had most impact on English out of any word that I'm ever going to mention in this particular series. Povva means apple, and I think I did grow up with this one a little bit, but like again, like most of the words in this particular episode, it's not one that was like as part of my personal lexicon growing up. It's just one that I would have recognized, and if someone said Povva, I knew they were talking about apples, but like only kind of vaguely. And this one is a very cut and dry sort of tracing back to the Sanskrit barber. Now, I say it's cut and dry, but actually it's kind of a construction within Sanskrit, and the closest sort of translation to what this could mean is from the word barbo, similar spelling, but with an O sound at the end instead of a A sound at the end. And that means like portly, you know, kind of plump. So not just fat, but you know, like a roundish kind of fat. And that of course could refer to the shape of an apple. But again, it all sounds kind of speculative to me. So this is not my speculation, but the speculation of etymologists. The next word is mass, which means meat or flesh, and it's not a word that I personally used again, but like the other words in this video, if somebody else used it, I tended to know what they were referring to. This one doesn't seem to have changed much across like not just the many sort of families in Britain where, you know, things tend to change from family to family, but also it's one that stayed the same from continental Romany, and so across most of Europe it seems that mass refers to meat. If I'm wrong about this, then please do correct me, or tell me what your family's sort of version of this word is, if it's different from mass. This one, very sort of cut and dry one, I would say, because it comes from the Saraceni Prakrit and the Sanskrit Mamsa, but also this one can be sort of traced back further via constructions in Proto-Indo-European, so very far back, with the word mems or something to that effect. Like I say, it's a construction, so it's probably not 100% the word that was used, but there are enough words that have traced from this origin point that linguists can kind of speculate that that is a word that existed that then went into a bunch of other languages. This next word is kind of interesting in how my dad uses it as opposed to how it's used in, well, in general Anglo-Romani, but also in Romani going back further. My dad uses the word Shok to refer to, it seems, most green vegetables. I'm pretty sure I remember him referring to the colour green as Shok as well in that same conversation. But yeah, most green leafy vegetables seem to be called Shok in my dad's understanding. However, when I went looking into the word Shok on the Romani project, it seems to be traced very clearly to cabbage in particular. But in different families, also things like watercress and I don't think lettuce, but like maybe Brussels sprouts. I'm not entirely sure. Whereas my dad would use it for something like, say, lettuce. So Shok refers to cabbage pretty much in most Anglo-Romani families in Britain. But if I go looking into the sort of European Romani, the continental European Romani people, I'm able to find examples of Roma people using it for cabbage in Latvia. So that suggests to me that it's one of those words which really stuck as being cabbage across most of the continent. And if I trace it back any further, the only thing I was able to find from the World Loanword database is that it seems to be traced back to the Old Indo-Aryan Shoks. Unfortunately, I'm ending today's video on a word which has the most speculation from me of any word to date. My dad insists that in his family, growing up, grunters referred to nuts. And so an individual nut is a grunter. I thought maybe there would be some kind of like continental aspect to this perhaps, or maybe further back. But as best as I can work it out, this is a very localized word indeed, having either come from an Old English kind of origin point, which I'll get to in a bit, or coming from the like cant language, the thieves' cant language, referring to a grunter as a mark. I don't think that's what it probably comes from if it's referring to nuts. And so this is where I have to do the most speculation I've ever had to do on a particular word. Please bear with me. Woodlice have a variety of nicknames in old sort of English dialects across the country. Some of them are absolutely ridiculous. I've only ever referred to a woodlouse as a woodlouse. But depending on where you grew up in the UK, you may have referred to it as a cheesy bob, which is hilarious to me, or a granny grunter, or a nut bug. or like so many other things. It's one of those words where it's just like, depending on where you are in the UK, you could drive like 50 miles down the road and there'll be a different name for it, like a different nickname. But yeah, apparently Granny Grunter was one of these words and Nutbug was another. And so if you really think about it, I mean, you could kind of imagine like a de-shelled roasted pistachio could kind of look like a rolled up woodlouse, I guess. I'm purely speculating here, but what if someone saw a bunch of woodlice, or a bunch of nuts indeed, and referred to them as such? And what if that one person who did that was someone who is an ancestor of mine, or someone from my family? I don't know. It's purely speculation, and that's because I was banging my head against the wall really trying to find any sort of link between Grunter and nut, and in the end I've had to pretty much guess at this one as to being a kind of a colloquial, like someone saw a bunch of nuts and thought, oh yeah, pass me the Grunters or something. I don't know. But if you do know anything about this, now I don't, please do let me know. I'm very, very interested. In any case, as best as I can work out, those are the remaining food terms that I am able to dig up from my family and from my lineage. If you have others, then please do let me know in the comments. Maybe some of them will be words that ring a bell for me. Maybe they'll be completely new. In any case, I'm very interested to hear. And feel free to check out the rest of this series as well as the other food video if you haven't already checked that one out. And feel free to check out the rest of the channel if it's interesting to you. I've done a whole bunch of these Anglo-Romany videos, but I also play a lot of video games and discuss music from time to time, which I'll probably be doing a lot more of in the coming year. And until next time, have a good one.